we're starting tonight's Fourth Estate on a sad note about the passing of our colleague Rosemary Nankabiro, who passed on at hospital in Nairobi earlier today. It's a very sad moment, and let me request the colleagues here to observe a moment of silence before we go ahead with the discussion tonight. May Rosemary's soul rest in eternal peace, and thank you all for the support you showed yesterday in trying to mobilize to get her better care out of this country. And of course, we will, NTV will keep you updated on arrangements to return her body home, and of course, the burial and funeral arrangements. Tonight we'll be discussing political failure in Africa and how it is feeding intractable conflict on the continent. Our case study tonight is South Sudan, Africa's youngest nation. It only became a nation in 2011, having signed a comprehensive peace agreement in 2005. But since 2011, it has failed to function as a country, with continuous loss of lives in that country. We have seen this replicated in many other African countries, but a few might have been able to break through, but others still remain stagnated. And some people attribute that to political failure that is feeding the intractable conflicts. Let me start my introduction with Madame Betty Olive Turuomwe Namisango Kamia. She's been a regular guest on this show and president of the Uganda Federal Alliance. Very nice to have you.
Thank you, Charles, and good evening, listeners, viewers and listeners.
Betty was the presidential candidate in 2011. The Honorable Sanjay
Tana.
That. Pardon?
Presidential aspirant. Candidate has something unserious about it.
Oh, aspirant. I don't know. I thought you become a candidate when you get nominated.
Yeah, but first of all, you are not a candidate. You're an aspirant.
And then you become a candidate.
Candidate is for the Electoral Commission. But for you, you're an aspirant.
Okay. For you, you're an aspirant. For what we know, you're a candidate. So you're a candidate aspirant.
She was.
That's fine. She was a candidate, yes. The Honorable Sanjay Tana represents Tororo Municipality in Parliament. Very nice to have you.
Thank you, Charles, and good evening to all of you out there.
Sanjay is an independent member of Parliament from South Sudan, from South Africa. South Sudan and South Africa. Dr. Remember Miamingi. Doctor, you're most welcome.
Thank you very much, Charles, and good evening.
Dr. Miamingi teaches at the University of Pretoria, but he is from South Sudan, that is country of birth. And of course, my colleague, Chris Obore. Chris, very nice to have you.
I'm an admirer of Betty's farming capabilities.
Yeah. Betty's also a farmer. I thought she's a politician.
She's organic farmer.
Okay. You haven't signed her mobilization for signatures for the referendum. Maybe you should try sign when you get out of here. Let me start with you, Chris Obore. We discuss politics every day. On the show, on other platforms, we discuss politics. Africa seems stuck with its politics of conflict. Sometimes people fail to make a clear distinction between what feeds this conflict. Others say it was the former kings that sold the continent to colonialists for mirrors and cowrie shells. Others say, no, it was the colonialists who merged together nation states into political boundaries drawn in Berlin and handed over at independence. Others say no, the independence leaders didn't rove on the wave of the need to drive out colonialists without thinking about what kinds of countries that they wanted. And now once you have gotten rid of, once you have gone over the first step, which is of post-independence leaders, you have come to African leaders bred by this system who still can't be able to break out of the yoke of political conflict and feeding intractable conflict. How does a country like South Sudan, in your view, the youngest nation on the African continent, deal with the politics in order to sort out the conflicts that are causing so much loss of life?
I have a lot of strong views about what's happening in South Sudan. And I've discussed that matter over time here. But since we have someone from South Sudan, an academic at a doctorate level, I would be very much interested to hear from him his understanding of the conflict of South Sudan, because he would be the one directly understanding it. Because the way we look at it now, we as Ugandans, is from a perspective that we have our army there, the nation is stabilized. But I want to hear from South Sudan, South Sudanese, what is the problem?
Let him answer.
Well, I thank you very much. I think that what we have in South Sudan, we have a number of problems. And you're quite right that there's a history to it. I am just about 40 years old, and all I have known is conflict. Conflict that gave birth to another conflict, into another conflict, to an agreement that produced another conflict. And obviously, we cannot discuss the current conflict without looking at historical antecedent that has fed into the politics, and that is the politics of exclusion. Sudanese were excluded by colonials, and when politicians took over, they excluded the people. And the only way people want to find themselves back is trying to grab that aim. So historically, we've had a situation in South Sudan where there's been a disconnect between people who were supposed to represent the citizenry and the citizenry's reaction to a failure of representation, trying to take over that post where the interests are supposed to. So for me, it is a conflict of representation, it is a conflict resulting from exclusion, it is a conflict from poor leadership, it is a conflict of lack of visionary leadership that we have emerging in South Sudan. And that has not been solved. And when we talk about peace agreement, I always want to clarify, I don't think we've had peace agreement. We had power sharing agreements. And that is slightly different from a national discussion that result in the terms on which we can live at peace with each other.
You sat as South Sudanese. You held a meeting in this hotel behind here in the conference center. I remember covering one of those meetings here under IGAD. You held a meeting in Nairobi and came up, you held meetings in Addis Ababa. All the regions, all the countries neighboring South Sudan have hosted one meeting or the other to resolve the South Sudan conflict. And you have fought against one another for half a century. And you still are fighting against one another. So if you say you did not sign, you signed a power sharing agreement, when you named it a comprehensive peace agreement, everybody else expected that this is comprehensive in its attempt to bring peace in South Sudan. What we're saying is a completely different matter.
The comprehensive peace agreement was not comprehensive in terms of the scope of people it covered. It was comprehensive to the extent to which it covered two parties, the SPLA, SPLM, and the government in North Sudan.
In Khartoum.
In Khartoum. Now, that in itself was an exclusion because not every single South Sudanese was a party and a member of SPLM. So the first thing that the peace agreement did was it excluded, and in this case, majority of South Sudanese, and provided a framework for power sharing arrangement between the government that is in the north and the southern part of the country. Whether it actually went into detailing as long as South Sudanese, and that is why we are still fighting, because as we sorted one problem out between ourselves and our brothers in the north, we suddenly realized that we have problems that has not been sorted out and was not included in that agreement, and therefore it could not have been that comprehensive.
I didn't actually take over. Chris was developing the string of questioning, so just go ahead, Editor.
You see, the problem of South Sudan is best understood by people in South Sudan, and I'm happy that he puts the problem where it belongs to the leadership of South Sudan. Even dwelling on the historical antecedents, it's also escaping the current crisis in South Sudan. You must ask yourself, why did South Sudan rise up against Khartoum? South Sudanese wanted to be treated as human beings. They felt the Arabs were enslaving them. The whole continent of Africa allied with South Sudan, that it was a genuine cause. Hey, you get to power, you are actually abandoning the very ideas for which you fought Khartoum. You have turned to be bad leaders, simple and period.
Yes.
You are simply greedy people. And the government in South Sudan is a collection of people in refugee camps who think they have come back to South Sudan to use South Sudan to settle their families, not in South Sudan, but in neighboring countries. And you are now drawing the whole region to address your problem when you know the genesis. Where is the leadership of Salva Kiir in this matter? He was a commander. Where is the leadership of Riek Machar in this matter? You are now running into Museveni. Our army is there. We are concerned. Did Museveni start your war? He didn't. You actually have no army. Museveni runs there to support Salva Kiir, who orchestrated a coup against his own government. Museveni thinks that Salva Kiir has an army. He reaches there. Salva Kiir is a man without balls. And it's Museveni who is holding South Sudan as a country today. In fact, you should be handed over to the UN for management. We are totally sick as a country. And you're exploiting the illiterate, poorly fed South Sudanese. You shed blood and gore because you guys feel to be powerful.
Okay.
Where is the charisma of John Garang? Where is it? Now, what happens now? You the intellectuals, are also busy in foreign capitals. Those who are there are claiming to be generals. Instead of you rebuilding South Sudan, what you needed, the infrastructure, you are all running to neighboring countries to build big homes. You are in Kampala here, your children are misbehaving in our bars. Our soldiers are there trying to recruit your state. You, the leaders, are busy planning to abduct each other. And you are blaming the West, you are blaming the other. Please, our army is in South Sudan just because of our strategic security interests. But South Sudan doesn't deserve to exist as a state. Okay. It should be handed over.
Chris, the question I think is, I hear you, and I hope the leaders of South Sudan are watching, because Dr. Miamingi is an academic, also caught in this intractable conflict. The question is, if you look even broader, you can pick South Sudan, you can pick Somalia, you can pick Democratic Republic of Congo, you can pick Sierra Leone, you can pick Central African Republic, you can pick Madagascar, you can pick any part of the continent.
It is warlordship.
Yes, even Uganda itself. Honorable Tana, you're a political player now. Where is the problem? Why are we as Africans unable to fix our politics so that we focus on...
Thanks, Charles. And I like the way Doctor started and his analysis. And he said that for us to understand the topic today and discuss it, we must first of all have a historical perspective. If you look at how was SPLM-A formed, these were small tribal armies. Remember that Riek Machar had his own army, Garang had his own army, there was a third faction, they were called the White Army or something like that. Now what happens is that there were 4 or 5 very strong factions that were fighting amongst themselves within South Sudan and also fighting the North. Now the North kept on fueling these smaller factions until John Garang and a few other regional leaders told these people that first of all, let's sort out the other one. So I agree with Doctor when he says that the CPA dealt with North-South but forgot to address the various, for example, our own question here, when NRA, you know, when you read the history from various books, Sowing the Mustard Seed, the one written by Pecos and the others, they will tell you, they will talk about Fronasa, they will talk about the faction led by Kaira, and then the faction led by Lule, and then there is another element of the local leadership. When you look at all these factions and how they came together to form the NRMA, then if you realize the NRM came out with a government of national unity immediately after taking power, and that's how you had DP serving there, UPC serving there, and all the various interest groups were catered for. If we move out of Africa and you look at what the Singapore story, everybody likes talking about Lee Kuan Yew, who passed away recently, right? And if you look at how he built the Singaporean state, and you look at how President Museveni has successfully transformed with those various interests I think I agree with Chris that the political leadership in South Sudan failed to do exactly that. Now, when we go to look at the factors, like you have said, I want to address three major factors. One is foreign interests. Remember that South Sudan has oil. Oil is a global factor. The global powers want that oil. Who has been taking away that oil and who wants it now? So who fueled that war? Because there are people whose interests the proxies are fighting. There is the North Sudanese, and then there are the global powers at play. Then you come to the second group of interest groups whose interest within the region are the two parties at war serving. We have DRC, we have North Sudan, you have Ethiopia, you have Eritrea. So on whatever side Eritrea is, Ethiopia will go on the opposite side. You have Kenya, you have Uganda, and Burundi, Rwanda, Tanzania. So now, when we put that into the box as well, there comes the third factor at play, that which Chris glanced upon, was that why can't Riek Machar and Salva Kiir, they were comrades of the late Garang. In my own opinion and understanding, and sometimes when I'm thinking alone, I want to believe that if at all John Garang lived, maybe today we would not be in the position we are, because he probably understood these various conflict groups better than the powers that be today.
Okay.
So in my own understanding, these are three major factors. The absence of Garang, the global players, and then the regional players, which is bringing this problem.
But you see, as debate comes in, Charles, before that point gets lost on the regional players, we also have to be very specific. Uganda is in that conflict. You need to study Uganda's interest in that conflict. It is basically strategic security interest. But Ethiopia wants the banking industry to thrive in South Sudan. Khartoum wants the war to continue as they take the oil. In fact,
Kenya.
the US that is thought to be behind it is actually the one that procured that South Sudan independence using Uganda, telling who's this Bashir that these things of you being a wanted ICC shall be lifted. Khartoum, Bashir really withdrew, and US using Uganda went in to secure that state. But the US is not even taking the oil. The Chinese are the ones taking the oil in South Sudan. That tells you the confusion of the leaders of South Sudan. So when you see that, as you see those things playing out, we must place where it is. It is actually UPDF that is doing a noble Pan-Africanist cause in South Sudan by trying to keep the state of South Sudan functioning. On its own, it's a dead state.
Okay.
Salva Kiir is a nobody.
Okay. Honorable Kamia, if you broaden this, Dr. Mimingi talked about something which I thought we shouldn't lose. He said they agreed on a power sharing. And when Honorable Tana raised the government of national unity in Kampala after the NRM takeover, I remembered, was that bringing on board the people, or was it power sharing of the central political players? And if we're using South Sudan as a case study, but the conflicts are littered across the continent, and they're intractable in every country that you go to. Even those that appear to be stable are actually walking on eggshells for the moment. What is the fundamental? What lies at the core?
I think, first of all, that nation building seems to be an ongoing process and almost unending process. Because when you look at the more developed or sophisticated states, like Britain, the United Kingdom, you know that the United Kingdom has been trying to be one United Kingdom for over 300 years. Yes. But they still haven't got there yet. Scotland wants out. There was a referendum last year. I think it's not yet over. Northern Ireland,
been asking that they should do it.
Northern Ireland fought a 30-year brutal war to get away from the United Kingdom, In fact, they relate more with the Republic of Ireland. And they had a very interesting peace agreement where the Republic of Ireland has a say in the management or in what goes on in Northern Ireland, which is part of Great Britain, which is different from Northern Ireland. So the story of the formation of the United Kingdom has been going on for 300 years and is still going on. Look at Germany. The Bavarians have issues. Look at Spain. The Catalans want out of Spain. I think there are nations like the USA and Australia and Canada, which have a different history, because those are countries of immigrants. All of them are immigrants. They just met in these vast lands.
But you still hear the flickers of confederacy.
Exactly.
In the United States.
Exactly. So it's not an African issue. It's a broader issue of nation formation. For me, which means it continues. It's always an ongoing process. It doesn't end. Now, when you look at, for instance, and revolutions never end the conflict. Look at the French Revolution. It took 20 years from the beheading of Prince Charles and his famous Marie Antoinette, King Louis and Marie Antoinette. It actually took almost 20 years of fighting and killing each other and disorganization. Just read the French Revolution. For 20 years, you'll be amazed until Napoleon Bonaparte took over and was eventually defeated at Waterloo. That's when the French Revolution, almost 26 years it took. And the American Revolution, it took so long. So it's not an African thing. And I think we should stop, this mentality of apologizing for things that happen in Africa as if they happen in Africa. I think they are human, if you like. If you look at a broader scale, there will always be a reason, I think, for conflict. Because today, if it is Northern Sudan, after you settle that one, then you find another one. So really, I would like us to look at it in a broader context of human. But I would like to look at it as a question of nation building, especially when there are different communities that relate to each other and almost refuse to give up their identity. It is holding on to, it's a question of holding on.
The trouble is,
just to build her point.
Just finish her point. And then,
So I think that we should stop looking at it maybe we'll get some comfort. Of course, there are some, because our conflicts in Africa are fresh, They are 20 years, they are 50 years, whereas the conflicts in Europe are 300 years, are 200 years. So they've kind of gone to another level of management. Like in Britain, they had a referendum, and the level is, we all agree on this method of resolving a conflict. Yes, we agree. But the conflict has not gone away, because the issue of Northern Ireland and Scotland has not gone away. But they just go to a level of accepting how to manage the conflict. But I'm sure that another generation will bring up the question of Northern Ireland and Scotland and the Catalonians in Spain and the Bavarians and the Flemish in Belgium. Those issues are all there. They have not gone away. They have not resolved them. It's just that they're at a different level of management. And with us in Africa, our conflicts, because our nations we're at the initial stage of nation formation, where you're still trying to even understand what the conflict is. So we shouldn't be so hard on ourselves as Africans.
Okay. Honorable could you just hold your thought for a moment, so that we have... yes.
Just a minute. To add to what she has said, in our context, you see, to me, while I agree with her that we are not to blame ourselves, for me...
No, I didn't say that. I didn't say we're not to blame.
No.
I said
understand.
It's not just Africans.
Yeah.
It's a global thing.
Exactly. But I want to give it a little bit of touch of history. You mentioned the Berlin Treaty, and I want to go to the Maastricht Treaty. These European powers sat in Europe and cut Africa into pieces. For example, in Tororo, we have the Iteso in Uganda, and we have a whole district called Teso in Kenya. And you have families divided.
Related.
Agri Awori, Uganda, Mudi Awori, Kenya.
Same father, same mother.
And all of them are Basamia. Now, this was a recipe for conflict, which they designed and kept in the pressure cooker and is now precipitating.
Yeah, but then who designed the recipe in Britain?
Okay. Let's have Miamenji come in. Because from an academic background, you said these guys signed a power sharing, not a peace agreement.
Yeah.
And you said there were bubbling conflicts of those disagreements. You have the Nuer, you have the Dinka, you have all these sorts of tribes, small little tribes that fail to agree to work together. You've listened to everybody else, and especially Chris. Does your analysis of that problem change now? If it doesn't, South Sudan was credited during the period of the conflict as one country at war that possibly had the most highly educated citizens in exile. And at the signing of the CPA and at gaining independence, everybody thought you're going to bring all these experiences from the world, the history that Betty Kamya is talking about, and to alleviate ending up in a situation that Chris was describing. What happened? What went wrong?
Yeah, thank you. Let me just quickly react a few issues that will come to
Sure.
this. First, what I don't understand is if the Europeans divided Africa outside Africa, what has stopped African 50 years down the line to change the lines? Why can't the line between Uganda and Kenya be removed? Why can't the line between Sudan and Uganda be removed? We accuse these people of dividing lines we are falling in love with. I think we should be able to also address the root causes of our own love for our instrument through which we were enslaved. That's one issue. Now, certainly, I also want to react to the fact that somewhere I, as so many South Sudanese, are grateful to the role Uganda has played historically to get us to 2005, where we had a comprehensive peace agreement. And also, will to some extent, the role that Uganda has played immediately the breakout of the conflict. It is Uganda's intervention probably contributed to reducing the disaster that would have happened. But I'm wondering, Chris talked about strategic interest. In a context as volatile as South Sudan, as divisive as South Sudan, where government is predominantly one ethnic group, I am not a spokesperson from here, cannot determine the strategic interest of Uganda, but I'm asking, is it in the interest of a country that has stood with the people of South Sudan to be drawn into a conflict that represents and standing on one side of that population, which precisely is what is happening right now? Is it not quite possible? And in my opinion, people talk about a trade country, talks about the US. The powerhouse has come to South Sudan is Uganda. And Uganda's most powerful instrument are not the bombs. It is diplomacy. It is the power that very renowned politicians, experienced leaders, like the president of this country, who knows South Sudan in and out. He is the person who has the key to solving that problem without shooting a bullet. Pan-African role, that will be what I will go for. Bullets and bomb, not my liking. In terms of UDEP, that's on that side. But now on the analysis with respect to what we have in South Sudan. Of course, yes, there's a failure of leadership. There's no doubt about that. We had a leadership that came into power and exclude. I was personally part of a process that documented the database of South Sudanese experts outside who were ready to return back home voluntarily and contribute, in some cases without pay. We had politicians home who said, it is our time to eat. When you were fighting and dying, you were outside in schools and enjoying yourself in hotels, and now you want to come and take over. So you cannot blame those who are gallivanting capitals outside the world, because literally you have nowhere to go to. I've been in Juba and I've seen people with PhD certificates looking for a job from office to office, and they don't find. And you have people in those offices who cannot sign their names. So we have a system that does not allow that and does not encourage. So basically, I'm saying that the accommodative politics that we've had in South Sudan, where we are comrades in arms, we accommodate ourselves, and everybody else is an enemy, everybody else is against us. That mentality is what we have. So everything we have said, plus this analysis.
Why do you think we're unable to, let me throw this across the table. Why are we unable to move beyond that and say there is something like managing our conflicts, which Betty talked about, managing our conflicts, like other countries have moved on to managing their conflict, to addressing the fundamental issues that affect.
You see Charles, the conflict in South Sudan, and I've said it here, it can only be solved by South Sudanese. So I am not in perpetual interest of Uganda being in South Sudan. But Uganda's being in South Sudan is a reality, that we are there. And those people who are there, who are dying on your behalf to keep your state alive, our brothers and sisters.
Absolutely.
You ought to respect us for that. Remember,
but they are also my brothers and sisters.
Remember, when that war was there, part of the problem South Sudan has is that you did not earn that independence. You were helped to get it by the US through Uganda. And you did not get victory. And you don't know how painful the victory was. So you are like people who have been thrown into red meat. And you are dying each to have a peace. You don't know how it came. Hold on, Betty. When the independence was got, Salva Kiir ignored Museveni. You all know that. Even during the day of celebration itself. They had ignored Museveni. Irrespective of the role he played. We have issues here in Uganda. But I'm speaking first as a Ugandan national. Irrespective of my differences with Museveni. You ignored Museveni. When Salva Kiir engineered the coup against his own government by killing the Nuer and whatever and causing that war, Salva Kiir panicked. It took him 7 hours to get Museveni to help him. So Museveni is there on invitation of Salva Kiir. And our soldiers are there. We are spending. You're not paying us. So we are saying Uganda simply wants a stable South Sudan. We don't want your problems.
Okay.
Now, how would you solve the problems? When you got the independence, any sensible leadership at your level, you're educated. First thing would be governance reforms. You ignored that. Second thing, security reform. You ignored that. What am I seeing? As we speak, South Sudan, as hopeless as it is, has spent $54 million to procure 4 Mi-24 helicopter gunships. To fight who? To fight for the South Sudanese. And what are you doing as you're procuring them? You're sending your children to Uganda to Kampala parents. Instead of asking our Sudir to come to Juba and give you a better school, you are calling for Mi-24. So these are issues I'm raising. That your leadership is not focused, and you are spreading your confusion to look like everybody's problem.
Let's
For us, we are saying, we need you peaceful because LRA was there. Indeed, Northern Uganda suffered, we suffered. So if being there keeps him away and people can rebuild, good. We need that. But we don't need your problems. Solve your problems.
I've had a lot of debate about who actually procured the independence of South Sudan, because I think Ethiopia claims part of it, hosting IGAD. Kenya claims a big part of it.
It is the US that procured that through trying to send carrots to Khartoum. There is no way a disorganized SPLA army after Garang would at one time defeat Khartoum. You know that.
If I had Dr. Miamengi well, he said the support by the government of Uganda, yes, could have prevented a bigger problem, but it's propping up a minority group.
No, but I want to respond to that. No, I want to respond to that, and I disagree with him totally.
With who?
With Doctor.
Yes.
You see, I agree with you to the extent that Uganda moving into South Sudan at the inception of this conflict within 72 hours averted a genocide, in my own opinion.
Didn't even avert. Sanjay, thousands of South Sudanese were killed in Bor and they lost.
No, that one was stage 2. I'm going to Bor, but I'm talking about Juba. Our troops were moved within 72 hours and averted a genocide. These guys retreated and went and held fort in Bor and took over Bor and divided the country on the basis of the Nile, which was then the second stage, which you are referring to, where they say thousands of people are unaccounted for and thousands are dead. Now, if at all today, for us in parliament, the debate is withdraw. Why? Because many Ugandans are bitter, like Chris is saying. Ugandan businessmen that are there are being mistreated. Ugandan expatriates that have been employed there are being mistreated, whereas when those same people come here, the South Sudanese, they are given VIP treatment. They literally own Kansanga, Kabalagala, and that whole part of Kampala, and they go to our schools and everything, and they are given VIP treatment, whereas Ugandans are being mistreated in
South
Juba.
Sudan.
Now, when you look at the lopsided benefit in all this, if it were not the Pan-African interest and the interest of humanity in this whole conflict, if today, just close your eyes for a moment, and UPDF withdraws, like you say, what would be the scenario? By you saying, and that's the point I'm coming to, that it is propping one side, that is not true, because like Chris said, that is the legitimate government for the moment. And it is that legitimate government that invited Uganda. So, even at that moment, sorry, it was reported in the media, even Monitor reported that, if I can remember right, NTV reported that, Ban Ki-moon asked President Museveni to help.
Yes.
So there is a UN mandate, though not official.
For help. Okay.
My point is that as Ugandans, the presence of UPDF, like Chris said, is an economic burden. The loss of lives, recently body bags came to Teso sub-region and people who were killed in Bor and Juba, and the situation in the grassroots is not really rosy. So to me, the withdrawal is in our best interest. The withdrawal should be done yesterday. But if we withdraw, what do we leave behind?
Okay. Just a quick question to you before I come to bed.
What is the cost of withdrawal?
There are people who believe that leave South Sudanese sort themselves out. If they kill each other,
that's what the French did in Rwanda.
No.
That's what they did in Rwanda. And what happened?
There's been that kind of thinking that if they sort themselves out, if Machar emerges the stronger entity, he puts together a nation. He cobbles together a nation. That Miamingi said, we are so wedded to these colonial boundaries that we complain about so much, that you'd sort that out. Others say if Fakir was able on his own to be able to manage that country, then he would emerge the stronger. Like Napoleon Bonaparte did in the case of France. Took over, managed to take the reins of control, and held, and then guided and built what appears to be a nation today. Do you think that would be more sustainable to dealing with these independent entities that were cobbled together by the Berlin Conference?
You see, Charles, after we moved in, after UPDF moved in, we secured property and life. Immediately, President Museveni initiated talks, and those talks are ongoing. The most and then handed over the auspices to IGAD, which was then chaired by President Kenyatta, and then now
I hear you.
So to me, I want to disagree with you on that, and Doctor, that let's give Rek a chance to hit these guys out, and then
come, a third force.
Yeah, and come and cobble a nation together. My point is, why waste of life?
I don't think
I want to buy Betty's idea that many of, like you said, many of them have been to these European schools, universities, etc. Why don't we manage this conflict through IGAD, through the security provider?
Does that provide a sustainable solution? Betty, you're itching to come in.
Yeah, I think that I think what you're asking is one, what I understood Dr.
Remember.
I was going to say, Dr. Remember to say is that yes, Uganda helped, but why are they supporting one side? And you know, I wrote a small book which was supporting the referendum in Uganda. And at the end of it all, I have a call to the international community. And I'm saying that we need aid, but not the kind of aid that perpetrates our enslavement. You know, because they give us aid, but that aid they give perpetrates the current system. And when you talk to the Europeans and the donor friends and they say, we don't want to get involved in Uganda's issues. When we tell them that the problem of Uganda is bigger than what you think, and we need to go to the bottom of the problem. And they say, we don't want to get involved in Uganda's internal matters. But they continue to give us aid to support the status quo. And we're challenging the status quo. So we are saying, fine, give us aid, but the kind of aid that will help us to solve our problem, not to enslave us to be dependents of this donor money. So what Dr. Remember was saying is that we are very grateful for the help, but if it's the kind of help that is going to perpetrate this conflict, then we need to think twice about it. But on the bigger picture, the other picture, to refer to what Chris Obore is saying, we are looking, I think Chris, and to a large extent Tana here, are looking at the nitty-gritty, in my opinion. Why is Uganda doing there? But the bigger question is, what is Uganda's interest? I mean, Uganda would not be there if Uganda did not have interest. And by Uganda moving out, just because the Sudanese are mistreating Ugandans and they are living like lords, I mean, they sound so petty, really. Uganda is there because of Uganda's interest. Security. Uganda is not there to support Southern Sudan. Nobody is anywhere to support. Even the British are not in Iraq or in Uganda to help. They're there to serve their interest, and they say it. So just we need to understand.
Yeah, just one thing. Just one thing.
Chris, just wait. What we need to understand here, what is Uganda's interest in this? Having talked about Uganda's, let me finish. Having understood Uganda's interest in southern Sudan, we must understand the cost of protecting that interest, and then the cost of not protecting that interest by getting out. Okay. I mean, these are the things we must be debating.
To have this discussion go beyond Uganda and South Sudan just alone. What would it take? I know there are lots of things that you need to respond to from very many other people here. What would it take to resolve the conflicts in South Sudan, if we could put it that way? Beyond why is Uganda involved? Should it pull out? Should it not pull out? How did it get involved? You have a conflict fundamentally. And if you removed the colonial boundary that created Acholi in South Sudan and Acholi in northern Uganda, that created Alur in South Sudan and Alur in northern Uganda, along the whole borderline, what is it that fundamentally lies at the core of resolving that conflict?
For me, the first is visionary political leadership.
Yes.
I thought that's what the politicians say.
But when I talk about vision, we have political leadership that is overly concentrating on building the stomach infrastructure. We're busy doing exactly what Chris is saying. We have politicians in South Sudan who have presided over a historical, monumental stealing of resources when people are dying on the street. And so when you say you want to help somebody that's not ready to help himself, you're basically calling for a problem for yourself. Secondly,
no, I think we should just go with you are there to protect your interest, not to help.
He called it stomach infrastructure.
No, I mean like Uganda.
no, but yeah, so generally. And on the
stomach infrastructure.
Apart from that leadership that we have there, as South Sudanese, we need to take responsibility. We've had a victim mentality. For years, we fought and then we run around and we're crying for people to come and help us, and people come and help us. We need to take charge of our destiny.
Yes.
And say, you know what? We did it before, we can do it again. Without a citizenry that can hold power to account, irrespective of the weapon power is holding in hand, you will not have leadership that is accountable. It's historical everywhere around the world. And so we need to be able to do that. We also, I'm talking about the regional dynamic to it. It is in the interest of everybody in this region. The Economic Frontier did a study this year, in January, looking at what is the cost of the war in South Sudan, even though you cannot put money on the value of lives. It will cost South Sudan, Uganda, Kenya, Ethiopia, Sudan, Eritrea over $20 billion in the next 5 years. If we sustain that war, if we resolve that war, each of the countries in the region will make $53 billion, double what it will take. So it is at the interest of everybody to help South Sudanese, and helping in this regard is basically, I mean, I would want to say, you can help me by standing and fighting around me and shooting the enemy for me. You can help me to do that for myself. And I think that there are rooms for us to do that. I really apologize for Ugandans that felt mistreated in South Sudan. But if you are in a system that does not respect its own people, it will do nothing less than that to foreigners, irrespective of the nationality they come from. It is not in the culture of Uganda. And so Ugandan treating South Sudanese honorably is natural, it's cultural. And we should not say because somebody is doing something bad and therefore we're going to do something bad. That is not us. So there are certain things that is happening that people feel it outside. South Sudanese felt it first. The killing foreigners felt, we are feeling it. The disgrace, the mistreatment, we go through it from a system that completely has disempowered its own citizen. So we have an establishment that is fighting everybody. And so I'm not justifying whatever mistreatment that has taken place, but I'm simply saying what you see is what happens every day to everybody on that.
Systems now, what is the...
Can I just extend this discussion a little more?
I want to
around 2003,
explain the exit strategy.
Around 2003, we're having these debates about Uganda's involvement in the Democratic Republic of Congo. But that Uganda withdrew from the Democratic Republic of Congo hasn't solved Congo's problems.
Absolutely.
The problems continue, only that we've kind of moved on as a country, as a neighbor, moved on and focused on our own issues. But the Congolese are dying every day. The conflicts are still festering.
You see, this matters. I think, Doctor, here, I share some sentiment with you. But we must, first of all, be honest. Because for me, I'm not a political actor, nor a military actor. I'm just a mere journalist. And I pick this information and want to understand more. The two options for Uganda to pull out of South Sudan. One, South Sudan must undertake security reforms. Ensure that the people of South Sudan, the citizens, are secure. But in order to do that, there must first of all be called a military unit. And you know for sure, the SPLA is not a military unit. It is a combination of different warlords coming together, having been helped to get into power. So first of all, when you say that Museveni has gone to support, ally with one group, which military group exists in South Sudan? There's no army. What is remaining in Juba is basically a Salva Kiir group. Riek Machar has gone with this group. And that's why Riek Machar actually is saying we must carry security reforms and run these groups first on a parallel arrangement as we do a psychological counseling of these people to accept that we are not just rebels. We are now a state army. Yeah. So without making SPLA a state army, you are going to keep blaming Museveni for having taken sides with Salva Kiir or against Machar, even if today he agrees to back Riek Machar. Salva Kiir will say he have agreed with Riek Machar. So the issue is basically lying on the part of the reforms being brought in the negotiations. That let's do...
And they need a third force.
Hold on.
They need a third force.
Hold on.
Wouldn't that take the discussion to the first issue to resolve, not to establish those reforms, but to have a meeting point between Salva Kiir and Machar, or even a third force?
But a meeting point normally is on agreement of interests. What is the meeting point? Hold on, you come. What is the meeting point? It is Riek Machar's interest to align with Salva Kiir's interest. And if Riek Machar is saying, this is the way we can build a state army, and the other one is refusing, how do you expect a meeting point? So you don't have an army. You have a militias of different warlords coming together from SPLA. That you must accept. Secondly, you need to carry out governance reforms, because essentially the significance of a new state is to take the destiny of its own people in their own hands. And that's the destiny. Give them the infrastructure. I have just told you $54 million Mi-24 helicopter gunships. To fight who? And yet you, the elites, know what's good for your families. You're buying land in Uganda, building one of the magnificent houses here. Your children, I'm not meaning you, your children are in our nursery schools. Some of them are declared generals at home for pass of salary. That kind of corruption. A child in nursery school is a general in the army and SPLA. So there's no army. So when you call for numbers of the SPLA army, it's not there. Because Salva Kiir, his generals are here, Kampala parents. You see a kid is singing nursery hymns, but at home is a warlord, a general, for money. So you must address those governance issues.
Exactly.
How extinguish Uganda?
But you see,
for Uganda to withdraw then, if you are doing that, and you are able to take care of Museveni's worries, Khartoum has not been in good terms with Kampala. With a very unstable South Sudan, there's going to be a spillover. Even if you are left alone, we share a border.
Okay.
And if we begin fighting, you are killing in Bor. What will stop you from coming to kill in Kitugum?
Okay. Now, let me just extend my question to the question I put to Chris. We moved out of Congo in 2003. We didn't solve, the conflict never ended. People are still dying.
Exactly.
So if we look beyond, if we took the discussion beyond the colonial borders, the Africans dying in Democratic Republic of Congo, in Central African Republic. So whether you pull out of South Sudan and say, for us in Uganda we are safe, now we have left that conflict alone, does that resolve the issue?
Do you know what? I've already given you an answer. The issue is governance issues. If Congo can address her governance issues,
but you know,
when Betty talked about, hold on, when Betty talked about Catalonia, you mix two things. You mix two things. Catalonia's struggle is not a governance struggle; it's identity. You cannot expect Catalonians not to have the same hospitals as Madrid. It's impossible. But in South Sudan, Betty, the cost of this greed, the cost of this war is more pronounced in Africa, where the vulnerabilities among the ordinary people are high.
Okay.
Now, I just want to put something right, please. I did not say here that the president of this country has gone to support one side against another. I said, when you enter a system that is divisive, whatever you do will be perceived to be with the side you stand with. One. The second issue is that whether you call it governance issue or not governance issue, some of the issues that you have highlighted are true. They are there. But I don't think is the solution. You've just described perfectly a country without an army. Can UPDF replace an army in South Sudan? How long will they be there? It is impossible.
If you agree that your army be built, the UPDF can offer experts to train you.
Absolutely. That's another level.
But you're not agreeing.
That is another level.
You're not agreeing.
That's another level. I'm saying you are now in the middle of a country with no army, as you've said, with 2 battalions in the middle of the country, with no system of protection. How long can you stay in that country and represent and defend that country that is not ready to defend itself?
Let me reply to Doctor there. You know, the most recent conflict, like Betty is saying, like Charles is saying, let's give this a global perspective. The most recent conflict we have on our hands is Yemen. And you know the Saudi government has moved in to protect the current Yemen government.
Yeah, the Yemeni president is in
is living in Saudi Arabia. Now, that tells you that though you may have sympathies with the Hutu, okay, the Yemen president, current, is elected, is legitimate in office.
No, but that's not enough.
No, just a minute.
It's not
so
enough.
That is why the alliance is coming in to help him. And when you say that we have 2 battalions there and helping one side against the other, you see, I think our role is when you and Chris are fighting, we are not sure whether Chris is stronger or you are stronger. Okay? Maybe Chris might be able to beat you up, or you may be able to beat him up. Our interest is, please don't hurt each other.
I wish that was the exact strategy, but that is not it. That's,
Well, that's what I'm saying. That's not our interest.
No, that is the objective.
the strategy is different.
The objective is that is the objective.
Okay,
to stop any further bloodshed.
I wanted to say
and
this.
we have successfully done that.
There
is no bloodshed. We are holding both parties away.
I want to talk. I want to talk about two things. One, when I started my own contribution, I said that different countries are at different levels of conflict management, if not resolution.
Management.
And the Europeans, because they went through this fighting 300 years ago, they have come to a level of managing it more amicably than us who are still, boxing each other. Now, in the case of Uganda, I want to use Uganda as a case study. We started off like everybody else, with the coups and counter coups and liberation wars and the guerrillas but what I hear in Uganda, a consensus is drawing around, we must solve this conflict without going back to war. That is a consensus which I hear around Ugandans. There are some, as we're talking there, some young and restless people who say, give us guns, we want to solve this Uganda problem with the physical way. And we are hearing more and more voices in Uganda saying we must solve it without going. So Uganda, it means that after 30 years or so, or 50 years or so, Ugandans are at a level which Southern Sudan has not yet gotten. So it evolves. True. And the governance thing that Chris is talking about is not a product. Here is governance.
The process.
It is work in process. And at different stages. It's not a product. Say, their problem is governance, sort out governance. Yeah. Even in the USA, they still have governance issues. In the UK, in Uganda, different levels of governance issues. But at the end of the day, yes, everywhere, you need to sort out, the governance issues and how to... and then you can deal with the other processes. Yes. But I want to talk about Sanjay's issue of interests. I don't know how he brought it, but we're saying, please, we want you to not to fight. And so we'll
don't hurt each other.
Don't hurt each other, fight, but we'll stay on the side of the legitimate one. I don't think that's how it works. You go on the side of where your interests best lie, your interests. That is why somebody will support a coup. Amin was President Nyerere. Okay, Amin's government wasn't really a legitimate government to say, but he supported the coup. And many governments actually have supported the other side. Not in the case of Uganda and Southern Sudan. If Riek Machar is working closer with the Northern Sudan, how does Uganda view that relationship of Machar and Northern Sudan? And should I just go with should I just allow Machar to use his strength, beat up Salva Kiir, come into office? What does that mean for Uganda, knowing that Machar is in cahoots with the Khartoum? So those are things that
those are dynamics that play.
Those are dynamics that play. It's not just to help. It's not because I don't want you to hurt each other, please.
Let me tell you about the issue of Riek Machar and the hobnobbing with the Khartoum. I think the propaganda against Riek Machar has taken precedence against who Riek Machar is.
No, is he or is he not?
He has been, and he has been hoping with himself, by the way. And I will give you history. Let me start from there. In 1991, Riek Machar's declaration against Garang, it was here in Kampala, in Nakasero, with Museveni's full knowledge. And Kalim Saleh is alive, coordinated that when they called the BBC in the house in Nakasero to announce Riek Machar denouncing Garang.
Yeah, but interests change.
That's what I'm telling you. Yeah. You should understand Riek Machar in that context. So, but why was Machar disagreeing with the late Garang?
Chris, let me put it in context. I am not for or against.
Yeah, I know that.
I am showing where Uganda's interest, where Uganda's argument will go.
And I'm coming to that. I'm not saying that you're taking a side. I'm explaining. So the point is here is
have your parting shots on
the disagreement between Riek Machar and John Garang arose from the policy direction. Garang was for a rainbow South Sudan nation. Riek Machar was actually the guy who was for independence of South Sudan. And that independence has been got. Salva Kiir, who is today the president of South Sudan, was believing in a rainbow country. The man who wanted independence is the man who's made a rebel today. So it's a disagreement.
Has he been,
At the same time,
has
hold
he been
on.
made a rebel? He's made himself a
But
rebel.
what made him become a rebel? There was something to do with Juba to do this. So let's not always badmouth Riek Machar without understanding his point of view.
No one is
Okay.
So when that
badmouthing
happened,
him.
I'm giving you the history. I hope you know it better than me.
I'm afraid
When
my
that
time is,
happened,
running out.
Museveni calls Garang here, tries to reconcile the two. And I can assure you, Riek Machar was in a house without even water. He was being taken to another house to bathe. He became suspicious. He wiggled his way out of Kampala by saying, if I sign this agreement alone without my commanders, how will they take it? Let me go and talk to my commanders. That's when Riek Machar